So I suppose the whole purpose of this property clinic is to guide you through the process of buying and selling. I suppose we're in a very tough, competitive market, and our aim is to provide some practical insights to you. I'm joined by a panel of experts here this evening. So Russell from Ashgrove Renewables. Welcome, Russell.
Thank you.
Catherine O'Brien from O'Brien Solicitors. So welcome, Catherine. Una Coleman, AIB. Welcome, Una. Paul Graham, all the way from Daft in Dublin. So welcome, Paul. And welcome here to Aisling, also from Daft. This is a kind of a time of year that I find people are planning for the year ahead. And a lot of that is about moving, whether they're downsizing, whether they're upsizing, whatever the case may be. And one of the first things I suppose I often get asked is, how is the market? And my response is, it depends whether you're a buyer or a seller. And what I notice is it's a very strong market. There is lots of demand out there. We've low supply, so prices are being premium prices are being achieved. If you're a buyer, it's challenging. You know, it's a tough market with low supply. But on the other hand, a seller is also a buyer. So just to provide you with a quick update on what's happening in the local market, we have Paul Graham here from Daft. So Paul, what insights would you like to share with us?
Yeah, and I'll just give you a very quick snapshot. And if you want more detail on this, Daft do a quarterly report as well that's available on the website. So you can Google it and you can actually see good stats based on the Cork region, West Cork region, and really home in and get a little bit more detail on it. But like Magella said, prices are still edging up. They're up 5% year on year compared to last year. 3-bed semis averaging about 327. They're up about 3% year on year. And detached houses, detached homes saw the biggest gains this year. They're up about 11% at 355. Stock is tight, as you mentioned. It's down about 1%. That's like the benefit of that. That's why good homes are selling very quickly. You know, so if you showcase your home really, really well, you're going to sell it very quickly in this market. Bidding remains competitive. Typical sale prices are now 7% above the forced list price nationally. In this region, though, it's actually about 8 to 9%, so it's doing quite well here, and I think that's a record high from what I can see as well. New homes, that's helping sales activity. The demand is high, so new homes is kind of, I suppose, there isn't a huge amount of second-hand homes. New homes is helping kind of, I suppose, to cushion that demand as well. And then you're looking at new home sales activity. It's holding up in relation to leads and transactions and inquiries as well. What does it mean? Because I know when I look at all these numbers in that Daft report, to look at them, I'm not a business analyst, I'm a sales manager. You know, I do say to them, just explain that to me in simple terms. It very much means demand is strong, like Magella said. Sales leads are up on Daft by 11%. The ad views, and what I mean by ad views is when someone clicks in and actually looks at an ad on Daft, they're up 25% year on year. So that's this time last year, they're up by 25%. So it's a huge lead. So there's more eyeballs on properties.
And what we're seeing, thank you for that, Paul, what we're seeing is, I suppose, especially around the abandoned areas, we're having a lot of new builds, but there's a huge shortage in the second-hand market. And while, you know, there's great demand for new builds, they're energy rated, etc. There's still a lot of the population like to have their detached property with a bit of space around them. So these type of properties are getting a lot of attraction, is what we find. Second-hand markets tight in supply, and there are great prices being achieved from that. So I suppose the big question I'm asked often is, when the first time I go into a property and they're thinking of selling, is, number one, what is my property worth? And so your first step is always to get a valuation, and when we go out to give you a valuation, we also give you tips and advice on what you need to do to prepare for sale so that your property will get the best price. The other thing, I suppose, is once they know how much their property is worth, that is the next question. How do we prepare our property for sale? And I suppose that's what I'm joined here by a panel of experts here today, because preparation is key when you're selling or buying. And, you know, you can't do it alone. It's a team effort. So I suppose once you've your evaluation got, your next step is you need to get a building energy rating certificate. And that's a legal requirement now when you're selling the property in Ireland. So I suppose over the years, when BERs came out first, they were just, a number on a brochure. Nobody took any notes of them. But now they're actually one of the first questions buyers will ask, what is the BER on the property? A and B energy rating homes are achieving 10 to 20% more than their comparable non-energy efficient homes. There's many reasons for this. It's down to green mortgages, it's down to people looking for more energy efficient homes, but that is the way the market is going. So I suppose if you're a seller and you're thinking you want to get the best price, how can you improve the building energy rating of your property without going to too much work or too expense? Russell, I'll hand that question to you.
Yeah. My name is Russell. I'm from Ashgrove Renewables. We're based down in Mallow. We're a renewables company. We've been installing heat pumps since 2001. And then we moved to solar thermal and solar PV, and we've been a registered one-stop shop with SEI for the last 10 years. So we work closely with SEI around the one-stop shop and the grants, the sort of multiple grant schemes that are available. There's two main ones, you may have heard of them. There is the one-stop shop and there's the community energy grant scheme. The one-stop shop is typically for a C-rated house where we're going in, we're identifying the upgrades, we're costing the upgrades, we're coming in, installing a heat pump, maybe solar, attic, installation, and we're in and we're out. The CEG scheme, basically we're handing the responsibility over to the homeowner, the stroke builder. It tends to be a derelict property, maybe there's an extension going on. It's not typically a one-stop shop project, but the responsibility is handed over to the builder and we claim the grants on the builder's behalf. Okay? Typically, you'll be aware that there's a vacant and derelict property grant, and I'm taking just a sample of properties. This now is a G, and as Vigella says, that's the lowest energy rating you can get. That's a G. This property it'll get, if it's vacant for over 2 years, which the likelihood it is, you'll get 50,000 from the council. You'll get a further 20,000 if a structural engineer will go in and deem some part of that building unsound. So you potentially have 20,000, another 20,000. So you have 70,000 between the vacant and the derelict. The home energy upgrade grants from SEI, which can be drawn down in parallel, can be anything up to 35,000. So that's installing a heat pump, windows, there'll be a wall upgrade. You need a whole thermal upgrade, basically, floors, walls, windows, attic. So you potentially 105,000 on any of these properties. And if you're selling them, you probably want to be factoring that in because that's what's available. Okay?
And I suppose that's a tip I'd often give to buyers, because the majority, especially young buyers that will come into us, they're looking for new homes or energy rated homes that are turnkey. And I always say, they will pay premium prices for those type of homes, but they really need to keep an open mind, because if you have a derelict property or a vacant property like that, you have the planning permission. So that is worth a lot to you. You can get all of those grants out there. So, keep an open mind. There can be great value out in the second-hand market if you're willing to take that bit of risk.
And you have this would be a middle of the road, a C3. You will qualify for the scheme here. These houses typically take maybe attic, heat pump, maybe windows, maybe cavity wall. There's grants of about 20,000 available here for about 40,000 euros worth of work. So 40 to 50,000 euros worth of work, you're getting back 20,000. You're probably adding, as Regina says, maybe 20,000 to that. You can either do that as the purchaser or you can do it as the seller. Do it before you bring it to the market. And those projects typically, from a works point of view, they're relatively non-invasive, maybe 2 weeks, and we're in and we're out.
And what about little things then, Russell, like putting in a stove or things? What impact has that on the energy rating?
Well, with the, as long as it's an air sealed stove from Magella, you're increasing the energy rating. It's like if you have an open fire, that's like a straw sucking the heat out of your building. And so typically, you're looking at the house with the heat pump, you're looking at air tightness, you're looking at various things like that. You're looking at basically, it's not so much what's generating the heat, it's the ability for the house to keep the heat in and the low energy costs.
So I suppose it's a good idea always when I go out to clients is to get your building energy rating done at an early stage. Because if you did want to invest in upgrades to improve your BR rating, you'd have time to do it.
And the biggest impact on an energy rating, maybe if you have an existing house and you're looking to get into a B3 or B2, it's solar PV that will give you the biggest jump in terms of
Yes.
in terms of ratings. And it's low cost relatively speaking.
Yes. And then, Catherine, from a legal point of view, what can homeowners do to prepare their property for sale?
Well, the very first thing is tell your solicitor. I mean, I regularly get sale advice notes and I have no idea the person is selling their property. So at the minute you have your property on the market, tell your solicitor straight away that you intend to sell, because that gives us an opportunity then to ask people where's your title? And I suppose where's your title is a combination of, the answer is a combination of things. There is the document itself that shows you're the owner. Very often now, since the land registry went digital a number of years ago, a lot of the maps are incorrect, unfortunately. So that's a big problem that people only find out usually when they've issued the contracts and the buyer's solicitor is coming back and raising queries. So if you tell your solicitor in good time, it gives us a chance to look at the title, see if the map is correct. The other big problem that we face with sales process is planning permission. People might have got a grant of planning permission for a property years ago and kind of built in accordance with it, or not, or didn't get planning at all. So these are things that take quite some time to fix. So their mapping and planning are the main two things. So I suppose it's the key thing is tell your solicitor in good time, because sometimes people don't know where the title is. They might have got a mortgage years ago and bought a property, paid it off maybe 20 years ago, and they're struggling to remember, are the deeds with AIB, are they with Bank of Ireland, are they in the attic? So, and it can take some time for people to kind of work through and remember and find things. So it's really, tell me before I get the sale advice note. That's my advice to everybody.
Yeah, I would echo that. That's one of the other things I would say to people when I go out on the very initial valuation is instruct your solicitor, because as Catherine was saying, it takes time to get all that paperwork ready, and it's when a property goes sale agreed. From that sale agreed to closing will dictate, the more prepared you are will dictate the speed. Isn't that right, Catherine?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it can take, we've closed in 2 weeks where everybody had everything lined up and you had a cash buyer now. Admittedly, 2 weeks is very much the exception. But on the other hand, we've had serious difficulties to resolve and it's taken a year. So it really, how you have to be ready.
And then I suppose moving on, when we're on the market and we've offers coming in and say we've an offer accepted, we're sale agreed. That very important word, sale agreed. A lot of people don't know what it means. And in Ireland, sale agreed is not legally binding. So after you become sale agreed, a valuer will have to go in, and even an engineer will have to go in, and a solicitor will take on all the searches. So, Catherine, they can be quite a long time from sale agreed to closing. What's the average length of time?
It's hard to give an average really, but we typically tend to say 3 months is a good average. Now it can take longer if people are getting a commercial loan or some such, it can take longer, but 3 months is a rough guide. It can vary enormously. Like I said earlier, you can if everybody is ready, willing and able, money's lined up and the title is right, you can close in weeks if everything's good to go. Conversely, it can take, as I said, a year if there are problems with the title. People persist in trying to resolve them, but rule of thumb, 3 months, give or take.
And what type of checks do you carry out for a buyer?
So the first thing that you would do is you would look at the title that's given to you. You would look at the map, so the first thing we do is when we get our contracts in is we ask our client's engineer to do 3 things. Check the property structurally, first of all, to make sure there isn't anything sinister there, so for the fall down. Check the map that's furnished to make sure that map accurately reflects the situation on the ground. And also importantly, check things like, is the well on the map and sale, is the septic tank, is the connection to the public services, because very often there are difficulties there where they are not on the map that's furnished and you might need a right of way or some such. So that's the first thing that we do. If the engineer comes back, we will then look at the title itself to see, sometimes they're old mortgages that haven't been cleared off the title. The planning is, the engineer will come back sometimes and say the planning is wrong. Their planning was obtained in 1990 and they put in extra windows, or there was an extension put up that wasn't exempt from planning permission. And sometimes then, depending on the buyer and their attitude, it may well be that in order to get a mortgage, you will certainly need to have planning rectified. You need to be able to say to a bank, if you're acting for a buyer, dear bank, I've checked the title, everything is perfect, including the planning. So in order to proceed with that purchase, it may well be that the vendor will be obliged or forced to get retention permission. So that'll take at least 3 months. What else is there? I suppose mapping, planning, rights of way. You often have situations where the property is not touching a public roadway. There was a big fuss a number of years ago where you absolutely had to have a registered right of way if you were using a right of way, which had been there for donkey's years. Now they've rolled back on that again, so you can show it's enough to say, well, I've been using this right of way for more than 20 years without any hindrance. But they're typically the main 3 checks is the title clear? Does anybody else have a mortgage or a hold over it? Are the maps correct, and is the planning right? They're the main 3. And if they're in order, well then typically you're good to go. I mean, there are other every case is different, and you can, with 10 files, you can have 20 different problems. But they're the common 3 which are yeah.
And one of my other questions, Catherine, to you, but I think you already answered a good fair bit of it, is what are the main reasons property sales fall through? Of course, we have engineers' reports and things, but I think you've identified a lot of areas.
A bad engineer's report, I suppose, where they've made an offer, in good faith, and then the engineer comes back and says, look, there's rising downpour, it's going to cost 50 grand, the septic tank, the system is going to, it's going to be 5 or 10 grand to upgrade. That's one of the main reasons. Funnily enough, the main reason that we see for property sales falling through is there's a mismatch between the seller and the buyer. We often have sellers who want to sell quickly they're moving back to the country they came from, or they want to get rid of a property that is just basically a headache for them. They're sick of managing the tenancy, or they just don't need the headache anymore. They're advancing in years. And we see this very, very often where they want to sell, and they want to sell to somebody who has the cash ready. And the buyer will say, I have the cash ready, but at the last minute, after contracts are issued, the buyer will say, oh, I need to get a small mortgage. And then straight away then there's a problem, because a lot of properties are not picture perfect. That's the reality we're dealing with. So the person who was ready and willing and able to go and had said they had cash no longer can do that, because they also now need a mortgage. And it means that things that a cash buyer might choose to ignore, a mortgage buyer cannot. And that's our most common reason for sales falling through, is the vendor then gets really cross and says, look, I didn't sell on this understanding, and the sale falls through.
And I suppose the other thing which we find there is a lot of people, I suppose, don't realise what a cash buyer is. From that, like, people come to me and say, I'm a cash buyer, and the discussion goes on, but I have to sell my own house first. So you're not a cash buyer if you have to sell your own house. And that is where it comes in. I suppose when we get an offer in, I would always ask, and every agent would ask for proof of funds. The reason being, we need to be able to demonstrate that you can financially carry out the sale. If somebody gives me proof of funds, whether it is mortgage approval, but if they're a cash buyer, we still ask them for proof of funds, whether it's a letter from the bank or a solicitor. And if they have a property to sell and it's not on the market, I have to go back to my client and tell them, this client has to go to the market, they have to sell their property, so it's a higher risk for my client. But it's a catch-22, because if you're out there and you find a property and you want to put an offer in it and your own isn't on the market, we can't accept that. The main thing is, if you're thinking of buying, to be really, really in a strong position, put your own on the market. It'll always be, you can put the clause in that it's subject to you finding another property. And us as agents will inform the buyer that. And once buyers are aware and communication is clear, there's not problems. And so that is one of the main things, as you pointed out, is sales fall through if things aren't being made clear. Moving on to more the buying side of it now, it's a tough market out there for buyers. And supply is low. We seem to be way short of meeting our government targets yet again. We are seeing more new builds, but second-hand properties are in very, very short demand. So for buyers, what I always say is, make a list of your needs, what you really need in a property. And I suppose one of the key things that you have to get right is location. Location, location, location. Once you're in the right area, you really have the bulk of it done. If you have, you can always work on a property. I had a family come to me from up the country last year, and they were looking for a property close to schools where their kids could walk to school, where they could walk to amenities in the area. Again, they looked everywhere. They couldn't find it. Then they started expanding their search, and they found what they called their dream home, but it was about 20 minutes drive out from schools and towns. And they felt this was it. So I reminded them, does it tick your boxes? And when they sat down again with their list, no, it didn't. Their goal was they wanted to be able to leave their kids, walk around to amenities. So you got to put on, if it's 3 things that you want, and you have to be flexible as well, because we're in a tough market, but just get your basics right, location, what needs you want in a property, and get those right. And of course, the other thing then is the budget. Prices are going way above guide prices. So you got to, I suppose, be realistic in that. What is the maximum you can be prepared to pay, and stick at that. And I suppose a buyer going in to get a mortgage, Una, what advice would you give them? What kind of documents would they need?
I suppose we obviously do second-hand buyers, we do first-hand buyers, but I suppose the biggest piece of advice is come in on time, because we really look back at the kind of previous 6 months is our criteria in terms of their savings. And so I suppose there's 4 rules. A lot of people will know the first 2 rules. So if they're first-time buyers, it's going to be 4 times their gross income is the max you can borrow. Second-hand buyers, 3.5 times. They need 10% deposit, that's changed years ago. Second-hand buyer needed a 20% deposit, that's changed now, so everybody needs 10%. If you're buying a new house, there's different rules then, because you can claim the Help to Buy scheme or the First Home scheme, and they're government schemes, and people kind of need to research those. But the Help to Buy scheme could be used as a deposit, or the gift could be used as a deposit, and some people don't realise that. But having said that, if you got the gift, your 10% is a gift from your parents, if they were so good to give it to you, you still have to demonstrate that you've been saving money for the previous 6 months or rent, and that's very important. So if somebody is renting, say, for €1,500 a month, don't pay it in cash, because we can't use that. Well, if they get a tenancy agreement, we can, but typically if you're paying cash, the person won't give you a tenancy agreement. So rent has to go through the account, and they have to show a build-up of savings. And that's very important. So people might have the income, so they have the good jobs, they have 4 times the income. But if they're spending all their money every month, the bank don't like that. They need to be able to see that they have been doing the mortgage payment and extra for the previous 6 months. So it really is important that you come in on time, that you don't leave it until the last minute. Just going back to what you were mentioning about second-hand buyers,
Yes.
A lot of people will come in there and say, I want to sell my house, but I have a mortgage, what do I do? Again, come in on time. There's 2 options there. Ideally, particularly if somebody has young children, they won't want to sell the house unless they need the equity to go towards the new house. They might want to stay in their existing house, so we look at that option first. Can they afford to pay the existing mortgage, and can they afford the new mortgage? So a lot of the time there, somebody will actually get a sanction for their max mortgage with the intention of clearing it off or part of it when they sell their other house. So in that scenario, then you'd be advising them to go part variable on the new mortgage, and they can sell their house in 6 months' time and clear down some of their mortgage. But if they're not in a position to do that, then we just have to say that there'll be a contract for sale on their existing mortgage. So there are 2 options for people. Not everyone can afford to pay the 2 mortgages, so then we go the other option where they have to sell the first one. So I suppose really, there's the 4 rules, 4 times your income, the 90%, and then we have 2 bank rules where we just literally, it's quite a simple formula. We add up people's net income, we subtract any other loans they have, or if they have an existing mortgage, if they have childcare, and what do they have left, and then that has to match our stress tested mortgage payment. So it's not rocket science, but you need to be prepared for 6 months previously. So I would say just come in on time so that we can actually go through that formula to make sure that you're ready. And a lot of the time we do have to say to people, look, you're not quite ready yet, but in 3 months' time, 4 months' time, you'll be ready.
And it's preparing, you get that guidance at an early stage.